a total of 256 cases. England were left frustrated at Euro 2024, only managing a 1-1 draw with Denmark. They failed to progress to the last 16 with a game to spare. These England fans in Birmingham told LBC the patience with Gareth Southgate is wearing thin.
I felt we dropped off a cliff, and Southgate is a weakling for this team because I think that the quality we have, we're not great defensively.
You cannot come into the next game with that same first team because it just clearly doesn't work.
And the actor Donald Sutherland has died after a long illness. The 88-year-old appeared in films such as Pride and Prejudice and The Hunger Games. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 67 points at 82.72. The pound buys $1.26 and €1.18. LBC weather: patches of rain in northern Scotland and the northwest of Northern Ireland tonight, and a low of 6 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 8 on LBC. I'm Iain Dale. We are streaming this hour on Global Player and on the LBC YouTube channel. So if you'd like to watch us, you can do so. And it's going to be really worth watching it, I think, because we're going to have a great debate. Back in 2015, in the election campaign then, when most of my panel would have been about 10 years old, if that. We did our first youth debate, and at the time it got such a tremendous reaction that everyone felt that it had been a great hour, and I hope that's what we're going to have over the next hour too. So let me introduce everyone to you. We have Jack Barwell to my left here, who's a 21-year-old Conservative campaigner. He's the chairman of the Free Speech campaign, the Speak Easy National Group. Lucy Reader is a 20-year-old Labour campaigner. Janie Little, she's joining us via Zoom as a 21-year-old Liberal Democrat candidate who's the vice chair of the party's youth movement, the Young Liberals. Erin Crawford is a 21-year-old Reform UK candidate, and Dylan Lewis-Cresser is a 19-year-old Green Party candidate. We did have a 14-year-old apply to do this, and I was so tempted because he was so keen, but maybe at the next election, it's Zach who I remember applied. Maybe in the 2029 election, Zach, we'll have you for that one. Now, did I pronounce your name wrong? I think Lucy Reed.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
Right, sorry. Right. We will take calls from listeners. So if you've got a question you'd like to put to our candidates, I'm not going to restrict them to young people. I think everybody will have a view of sort of what they want to ask. So it's 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp on that number, or you can text 84850. Simple question to start with. What do each of you think your own parties have to offer younger people who are voting in this election? Let's start with Janie. Given that you're on Zoom, I think we ought to let you start.
Well, thank you. I think the Liberal Democrats have a lot to offer young people. I think the values of the party align with that of most young people, or a lot of young people. So I think 3 sort of key areas I would highlight are, firstly, we have a very strong track record on human rights, including the campaigning we did against the Tory crackdown on protests. But the party has also paved the way on LGBT rights, including sort of bringing forward same-sex marriage. I think, secondly, we have a really credible plan to tackle climate change, which is obviously something a lot of young people care about as well. And we also have a great plan on housing, investing particularly in social housing, and sort of looking at renters' rights and banning no-fault eviction and stuff like that. And I think also our internationalism as well appeals to a lot of young people with our commitment to rejoin the Erasmus Plus programme. And obviously the party is known for being very pro-EU, and a lot of young people are as well. So I think the values of the Liberal Democrats really do align with that of a lot of young people.
God, you went through the entire manifesto there almost. Jack Barwell for the Conservatives.
Iain, firstly, what I want to do on this hour, because I know there's going to be people that have concerns about our government, is to be honest with people throughout this debate. And the first thing I want to say and be honest about is there's a very good reason why young people are feeling disengaged generally. Politics has moved away from them, and our generation is very politically active and maybe doesn't always feel that the parties do reach out to them. That's why things like this is a really, really important step for us to take. Now, I want to say a couple of things about young people. And the first thing I want to say is we don't all think the same. Iain, I'm a big fan of Brexit, but if we believe the Liberal Democrats, all young people are on the side of Remain. We have to understand that young people, like all different groups in society, have different views. And I never like it when we stereotype particular groups in society of all thinking the same thing. The fact we're all sitting here today, we're all going to passionately make our case, shows that. What will the Conservatives particularly offer? Well, there's a couple of things, and we've got to start with education. Education is the backbone for young people in society. Without a great education and those opportunities, we don't get anywhere. So what have the Conservatives done? They've massively opened up apprenticeship opportunities. The work that Gillian Keegan, as the current Education Secretary, has done has been wonderful. She was down at my university, ex-university, helping with the partnerships with local colleges. Those apprenticeship opportunities give kids other access into life. If we went back to Tony Blair's approach of 50% of people needing to go to university, and remember Keir Starmer wants to support that as well, that would only make the situation for kids worse. So education is the start. There are other things I want to see us do, and housing is one of those topics that's going to be brought up.
Well, we're going to come on to that next, so hold
there you
your
go.
I'm
I'm jumping the gun in. I'm that excited to promote the Conservatives tonight.
Dylan Lewis-Crasso from the Greens.
Yeah, I think in this election, what the Greens are offering, not just to young people, but to everyone, is a manifesto and policies of real hope and real change in this election. I don't think any of the other parties have the ambition needed to address the crises in our country right now. We've seen public services are at their breaking point across the NHS, across policing, across care. This country needs significant investment in public services and in our country, and that's what the Green Party is offering. Firstly, on education, we would scrap tuition fees and reintroduce the maintenance grant, which helps more young people get to university. We know university, while not for everyone, is a social mobility issue, encouraging people who might not typically go to university to get there. And we know that the restrictive nature of maintenance loans and tuition fees is a really big barrier to that. I know I don't get enough to survive. I have to work 2 jobs to be a student and survive. And so the Green Party would particularly go after that. But also, it's important to look at how climate and nature are really big issues for young people. The young people are going to be living in a time where climate change has devastated communities all across the world. We're going to have waves of people who are severely affected by climate change, and the Green Party is the only party investing enough and having enough ambition to really deal with the climate emergency.
Okay. Lucy Reid from Labour.
We are the first generation in living memory to grow up expecting not that life will get better, but that it will get worse. Currently, it looks like none of us will really ever be able to own a home. Most of us will never earn enough or save enough to retire comfortably, and the infrastructure that we rely on to take us from cradle to grave is crumbling beneath us. Not to mention the wars and the conflicts across the globe and the fact that our planet is heating up at a pace that we can hardly keep up with. And Labour, for me, is the only party that is setting out a plan and a mission for the future where it looks like, not to quote Dee Ream against their will, that things can get better, that there is hope. Not only do they have clear policies that will have immediate, tangible, concrete benefits, not just for young people, but for everybody. I also really appreciate that their plan is pragmatic. It's not promising policies that it can't deliver on, like, unfortunately, some of the smaller parties do. Most importantly, I want a government that wants to serve me. And Labour is the only party with a serious ability and desire to do that.
OK, let's go to Erin Crawford from Reform UK.
You'd all be surprised, but Reform UK has a big growing number of youth supporters, and I think it's for quite a few reasons. First of all, education, massively important to everybody. We seek to scrap student interest on our loans, because at the end of the day, we can't just scrap student tuition completely. It's not really feasible. But anyone who goes through education gets this interest, which mounts up every year on a 7% basis. So we would scrap this out. So the debt you have, it would stay stable. It wouldn't just mount up. We would also raise the tax-free threshold to £20,000, which would massively ease the cost of living, helping most people, because most young people are on minimum wage or just slightly above, and they're all subject to this income tax. Raising this would raise about 7 million people out paying income tax. And lastly, as we all said, housing. Housing is a massive issue for young people, and Reform have a clear plan to actually be able to make more affordable housing by creating more social housing, which is needed. Everyone says, Conservatives have been saying how we're going to have 300,000 houses built a year. This hasn't happened. It's only been at 200,000. It's a massive shortfall. We'll create it on these brown belts, and we'll start looking at these vacant houses. There's 200,000 in the UK at the moment, vacant houses, which can be lived in, which can be workable, but nothing's been done. It's not even been looked at. Reform will look at these issues.
Well, I deliberately didn't interrupt any of you. I'm not going to promise that won't happen throughout the rest of the hour, but thank you for those opening answers. 3 of you are standing as candidates in this election. 2 of you are not, but given that you're here, probably have an intention to in the future. What do you think makes a good MP? Lucy?
I think a good MP is somebody who recognises that the first port of call for an MP is duty, is service. And unfortunately, the MPs that make up our current government don't really seem to understand that.
All of them?
Well, the ones who've made up the majority of the scandals that we've been reading in the... I mean, you don't have to look at the scandals today. I mean, I know that's not MPs, but it's the people within the Conservative government looking to make a bet, looking to make money off of when the election was going to be called. Scandals such as, I mean, it doesn't need to be said, Partygate, COVID, PPE, the fraudulent contracts. I think that what this country is missing, or rather what the current government is missing, is MPs who recognise that duty and service is the foremost priority to be an MP. But I also think we need MPs who have real life experience. I mean, the Reform leader, the Conservative leader, both privately educated.
Is that a crime?
I mean, it's not a crime, but it's a very small proportion of the country.
You do know Keir Starmer went to a selective school as well, don't you?
Yes, but Keir Starmer, I mean, I don't know if anybody here knows what Keir Starmer's parents did for a living. I mean, we could probably look it up. But the Labour front bench, if they are elected into government, will have a record number of state school educated MPs. And I think that it's not the most important thing about an MP. I wouldn't kick somebody out of government purely for the fact that they were privately educated. But I think it's important that the people who are working to make our lives better understand what it is to live in real life and don't just swan off back to California when they inevitably lose on July 4th.
Ooh, vicious attack on the Prime Minister there. Let's go to Erin from Reform.
I think a big thing is no member of Parliament should be in it for personal gain. Everyone knows there's a bit of a salary behind it, which leads to quite a lot of corruption. I think we've all saw that. A lot of MPs are not in it for righteous reasons. They should only be in it for actually helping the country they represent.
You do need to talk into the mic.
Oh, am I not in the mic?
No, don't touch it, just talk into it.
I think a big thing as well is an MP should actually represent the people's views they represent. A lot of MPs just say what they want, say their views without considering the people they're actually representing. And they should be feeding back to the people as well. They shouldn't just dictate in the House of Commons what they want to say, how they vote. They should vote in line with the people. And we don't see that happening anymore.
Well, we have a representative democracy, don't we? We don't have a delegated democracy. So just because there might be an opinion poll in your constituency, I mean, say, for example, you're hoping to represent a constituency. Say there was a poll in that constituency that said that 65% of your constituents wanted to rejoin the EU. You wouldn't go along with that, would you? Because you're a leader, not a follower.
But the point of being an MP is to follow the people's wishes. So say if I personally am against...
Really? Surely it's to lead public opinion rather than follow it.
No, because the member of Parliament is to represent the people. It's not to just dictate to the people, oh, well, I want this. You voted me, so now whatever I want, I'm going to do. You should represent what they want still. Even if your personal opinions are against it, it should be what the people actually want. Hence democracy.
Dylan, do you agree with that?
I mean, it's very important to feed back to people, but MPs are elected on manifestos that spell out the policies that we stand for. Of course, if something is not in but that manifesto is not only a list of policies, but also a list of, at least in the Green Party's case, a list of ambitions and a list of values that really represent the person that you would be electing if you elect a Green Party MP. Of course, it's important to feedback and be collaborative in your approach to politics and democracy with constituents. That's why the Green Party doesn't have a whipping system in Parliament or in council, for instance. We don't tell...
It's also because you've only got one MP, isn't it?
You beat me to it.
But also in our councils, for instance, in Bristol, or in Sheffield, or in Manchester, or in Solihull, or the places where Greens have councillors. We don't whip our councillors there because we think it's important that they're able to represent constituents' views that may differ slightly from the Green Party. But when you elect a Green Party MP, you elect someone with values and you can expect that Green Party MP, you can hold them to account to those values and the policies that they were elected on.
I'm not saying to toss aside values, though. Every MP should obviously hold values, but those values should represent the constituents. What I'm saying is not to dictate your own views to them.
But surely when you're elected, your values are voted on by the electorate. in a constituency where, say, a Reform MP is elected, people would have voted for Reform values. In the constituency where Green MPs are elected, they would have been elected on Green values. And so it's not just to say they have to follow the whim. Follow everyone's whim on that, but they need to also, as previously said, be a leader as well as like a representative.
Jack Barwell from the Conservatives.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on this. I think the most important things are to tell the truth, as I said at the start, to be honest, to tell the public what you want to do, and then trust, and for the public to trust that you will actually deliver it. So say what you're going to do, policy-wise, and then actually deliver. I have to pick up, I'm afraid, on some of what Lucy said, because she's had 2 answers so far, Iain, and I haven't heard one policy yet. I heard a lot of talk about missions and ambitions. I think you're doing a very good job of following your leader's footsteps, let me say, because this is the Keir Starmer approach of politics. Don't really commit yourself to anything that could be dangerous because we've got a massive lead in the polls.
What you accuse her of doing.
No, I'm not. I've talked about policy so far. I've talked about the successes of education.
No, but you're having a go at her rather than answering the question.
No, I have answered the question, Iain. I've said we need to be honest, we need to be truthful, and then we need to stick to our policies and deliver them. So, for example, if you elect Conservative MPs at this election, flights will take off to Rwanda. That's a promise we made. That's something we want to commit to, and we'll do it. For example, in 2019, we promised 20,000 police officers, and we actually delivered them. That's a delivery from this.
Having cut 20,000 in the first place.
And then bringing them back when the money was there to do it, Iain. So what we've done is deliver on the manifesto that we offered in 2019 on that point, and that is what I think the other parties should be brave enough to do. I will actually commend the Greens. The Greens are putting a manifesto forward. Unfortunately, it's a manifesto that means that people earning over £50,000 a year will pay more tax. I don't think that's right on the middle class.
Okay.
But at least they have the honesty, unlike the other 3 people sitting at this table, to actually put forward policies that could be delivered.
Janie Little for the Liberal Democrats. What makes a good MP?
So I think it's a few things. I think firstly being a local champion, and I think to sort of differentiate slightly from what other people have said on this, I think the really important part is listening. It's listening to your constituents. It's not necessarily sort of blindly following sort of what people say, but it's listening and it's learning about people's experiences and taking that on board. But it's also about integrity, and I think that's one of the reasons why so many young people and so many people in general are so angry at the Conservative government, because they feel that there's a lack of integrity there. And it's so important as an MP that you do live by your values while you do listen to the needs of your constituents and take those concerns on board. But I think a third thing as well is I think it's important that as an MP you have to have a real passion for change. It's about wanting to achieve something and wanting to contribute and to serve, as has been said previously. And I think we're really lucky sort of to have Ed Davey as the leader of the Lib Dems, who's talked about his experience as a carer and how he feels that he has a duty to stand up for carers. And I think that shows his personal passion for change and his integrity as an MP and as a leader.
What about all the stunts he's been doing, which surely make a party leader look absolutely ridiculous?
I don't think he looks ridiculous at all. I think they're quite fun, and I think all of them, while they're fun and lighthearted, and I think Ed doesn't take himself too seriously. He absolutely takes the issues facing this country very seriously, and those stunts all come with a more important message. Like, when he's been off paddleboarding, that's been to talk about the sewage scandal and Liberal Democrat policy on that. So I don't think at all that makes him, look ridiculous or whatever. I think it's a way to not take yourself too seriously as a politician, and also to grab media attention to talk about the things that he thinks are important.
Right, we're going to move on to questions from our listeners via text, phone calls, WhatsApp, Alexa, whatever. Send them in now and we'll put them to our panel in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC, it's 8:20.
This is LBC. Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
22 minutes past 8. Let me reintroduce my panel. Jack Barwell for the Conservatives, Lucy Reid from Labour, Janie Little from the Lib Dems, Erin Crawford from Reform UK, and Dylan Lewis-Cresser. Great name, from the Green Party. Right, let's take a text question from Hugh in Bristol. Where I live in Bristol, house prices have surged and rental prices have risen by 7.6% in the last year alone. How will the parties fix our housing crisis, which impacts young people so detrimentally? Try and think of one area that you would want to concentrate on to improve the prospects of young people being able to afford to buy a house. Erin, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, that sounds really irking. First of all, we would focus on getting more social housing because a lot of housing has been privatised, and when this privatisation happened of our housing market, this is where the collapse started to happen. Most young people can't get on the housing market because of this. So Reform would prioritise getting more social housing and giving aid to small-time landlords, not to the big ones, not creating a monopoly on the market. We'd have small-time landlords who would actually offer affordable rent to young people.
How could you guarantee that?
We would put more tax restrictions on big-time ones, and we would lower the tax burdens on individual landlords. But
where do you draw the line? Because, I mean, some people would say, well, if you own 10 rental properties, that could be considered big time. Others would say that's a small-time landlord.
The line definitely does need to be drawn. That would be something which needs to be discussed more, certainly. But I think the key point is we need policy there which will help create affordable housing. It's not really about how big the landlord is at the end of the day. It's about, are the people receiving the service actually helped?
OK. Janie Little for the Lib Dems.
I mean, the biggest thing that we can do to tackle the housing crisis is simply to build more houses. And the Liberal Democrats have the largest, but still credible, national housing target of any of the parties. Our target is 380,000 homes per year, which the Young Liberals were at the forefront of making sure was in the manifesto for this election. But simultaneously, we realised that social homes is a really important component of that, and we have a separate target of 150,000 social homes per year as well. So I think in terms of the most important thing,
just let me clarify that 150,000 on top of the 380.
No, as a part of it.
Right, because I mean, no government in history has ever built 380,000 homes a year.
But we believe we're not the Conservatives. The Conservatives have failed to meet their 300,000 housing target, but we are a different party, and we believe that we can do that, and that is the scale of the ambition that's needed to tackle the housing crisis.
Well, everyone can have ambition, but you also have to be realistic. If they haven't been able to build 300,000, how can you convince us that you would definitely be able to build 380,000?
By being a better government. We're not the Conservative Party, and we think that we can do that.
It's not just about not being the Conservative Party. You actually have to have plans. I mean, would you reform the Green Belt, for example?
We don't believe that we would need to build on the Green Belt to build those 380,000 homes. We think there's plenty of brownfield sites to be able to do that.
Where would they go then? Would you have new towns?
I mean, well, we've got sort of other policies on garden cities and things like that, and sort of development in cities and towns. But we think that is absolutely something that is credible and that is achievable. OK, Lucy Reid for Labour.
Don't worry, Jack, I'm going to get some policies to you now. I know you were disappointed before, but fundamentally, I think one of the biggest things that an incoming Labour government has to offer to young people is its commitments on housing. I mean, its commitment to build 1.5 million new homes, its commitment to...
But you're being outbid, because Jack is about to tell us that the Conservatives are going to build 1.6 million, and you've already heard what Janie said there.
I mean, fundamentally, I think that people have a little bit more of a reason to trust that Labour government's pledges will be delivered on, considering the last Labour administration and the wide-ranging scale of reform and benefits that came to the UK from that. So we have a history of delivering.
Yeah, but you didn't build many houses in the Blair and Brown governments. That's part of the problem.
I mean, more of a history of delivering. But what I was going to say about the Conservative government is they can pledge to build 1.6 million new homes. But we've already heard from several people on this panel how they're already not meeting their housing targets. But if you let me talk about Labour's policy, I think really, I mean, young people, we don't own homes currently. I mean, hopefully under Labour that will change with the Freedom to Buy scheme, which is where the government acts as a guarantor for first-time buyers, but also so many pieces of policy about protecting renters, scrapping no-fault evictions and ending rental bidding wars. And just on the point of the Green Party and the Lib Dem Party promising to build new houses but not really committing to building on the green belt. I think that, as Keir Starmer did say in a recent interview, you do need to be prepared to make enemies when you are facing a housing crisis of this scale. And I personally do think that, 20% of greenbelt land is actually not this sprawling utopia of nature that people think it is. A lot of it is actually derelict land that could be built on. But I do think that this is a problem that needs a massive solution that can't be fixed easily. And I think that the Labour Party has a really, really clear plan.
Jack Barwell from the Conservatives.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, so let's start with the important stuff. Lucy is not quite right when she says the previous Labour administration did well. You picked up on it, Ian. Let's just give the stats to the listeners. It was the worst performance from a government since 1920 on house building. Let's also talk about Wales. Let's remember Wales is Keir Starmer's blueprint. That's his own quote. Wales only built 6,000 homes last year. So when, Lucy, you tell us that we should trust Labour on this issue, I just wonder where the evidence for that trust is coming from. Ian, to get back to the original question, what should we do? There's a couple of things we need to do. We've already talked about affordable housing. A lot of people talked about that. You're quite right to say this is an ambition. I can talk about my 1.6 million houses that we want to build. It's an ambition. But here's the key thing. Here's how we actually try and go about doing it. We need to cut the interest rates. Now, obviously, that's not a government decision, but the interest rates need to come down. I've done work with the Devon Housing Commission, and interest rates are one of the big issues towards building new houses.
Why have they gone up in the first place, Jack?
They've gone up because of global factors, Ian, like they have across the...
Nothing to do with Liz Truss.
Oh, it was all to do with Liz Truss as well, but the large rise in interest rates has come from global factors. I'm not one of those Conservatives who's going to sit here and defend the indefensible. Liz Truss is indefensible, and if she doesn't like that, she can have it. The fact that we need to take... No, because we need to be honest. The current Prime Minister, who I'm incredibly proud to back, Rishi Sunak, didn't want Liz Truss in the first place and warned us about the dangers from it. I want to get back to your question, though, because the question was about the housing. We need to bring the interest rates down. It is a global phenomenon. We're bringing inflation down. It's now lower than almost anywhere else in the G7. Low inflation allows interest rates to fall after a while, and that will make housing better.
Where are these 1.5 million houses going?
OK, so this is a question about the Green Belt and what we're going to tackle about that. I don't agree with the principle that we should build all over the Green Belt. I don't think that's a good policy. I don't think it's good for the environment, and I'm sure the Green Party would back me on that point if they won't back me on anything else tonight. So we need to cooperatively work with councils. And what I think we need to do is we need to not have so many proposals on sensible sites and new infrastructure projects that don't affect the Green Belt being blocked. It's not an overnight solution, Ian. I'm not sitting here and saying that we have all the answers, but I am offering strategies by which we can reach our house building target.
You've had 14 years to do this, and you haven't done it.
Well,
so
firstly,
why should people think that you'll be able to do it over the next 5 years?
Because we did better than Labour when they were in government, and we have policies and ideas to take this forward. And I think we have seen progress under the Sunak administration, even if you don't feel we've been perfect throughout the 14 years. And the first thing I said today was that politicians should be true, and the first thing that I've just given quite a strong takedown of Liz Truss, who I don't think was Conservative and I don't think helped our country. Okay. But we need to be honest. Sunak is making progress. It would be a risk to let Keir Starmer in when you don't even know what he wants to do. That's common sense.
Dylan from the Greens. Now, the Green Party has a reputation where it has local councillors of basically saying no to any development and being complete NIMBYs. Is that going to continue?
No, absolutely not. I don't think that is a sustainable way to do things. But also linking back to our values of democracy, it should be allowable for inappropriate development to be blocked. But the Green Party, in our manifesto, actually, in the planning section, it would make it more difficult for individual planning applications for housing to be blocked because it would introduce a more zonal planning system. Just to come back from what we've heard from the Conservatives disavowing Liz Truss and crashing the economy, Liz Truss is a Conservative candidate in this election. So I don't know how the Conservative representative on this panel is disavowing her.
His name's Jack.
Sorry. I don't know how Jack is
Conservatives are allowed names. We're real human beings. I know the Green Party might not realise that.
But yeah, she's a Conservative candidate in this election, and the distance for Jack to distance himself and the Conservatives from her, I just don't think holds any water. In terms of the Green Party's position on new housing, we want to build 150,000 new social homes a year, and we've heard a lot about social housing from this panel so far, but no one's talking about the elephant in the room, which is Right to Buy. Right to Buy is leaking our social housing pool out when it gets privatised and sold for discounted rates. The Green Party would end Right to Buy, which has decimated our social housing stock and led to years-long waiting lists for social housing. Social housing is the social welfare, the net falling beneath people when they need it, and the Green Party would ensure that. We'd also introduce rent controls, which we know works when accompanied with house building.
Where have rent controls actually worked? Because in Scotland they've been introduced and they've been a disaster.
Rent controls work when coupled with mass house building. For instance, the example I like to go to is Vienna. Vienna has a rent control system depending on the type of house you live in, but also has significant extra house building, and they have some of the most affordable rents in Europe. The Green Party would also end no-fault evictions, giving more secure renters' rights, and introduce £29 billion over 5 years for extra insulation to make people's homes warmer and safer.
Right, we're going to go on to a very important question in the next section. But first, let's get the news headlines on LBC at 8:32 with Daryl Jackson.
Housing Secretary Michael Gove admits the latest claims some Tories were betting on the date of the election is embarrassing. Candidate Laura Saunders and her husband, who was Director of Campaigning, are both being investigated by the Gambling Commission. Officials say it's extremely troubling that Just Stop Oil managed to break into Stansted Airport earlier. Orange paint was sprayed over a number of private jets and 2 women have been arrested. And England were left frustrated at Euro 2024, only managing a 1-1 draw with Denmark. They progressed to the last 16 without a game to spare. LBC weather: patches of rain in northern Scotland and the northwest of Northern Ireland tonight, and a low of 6 degrees.
This is LBC. This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 8:35 on LBC. We're in the middle of our youth hustings debate with Jack Barwell from the Conservatives, Lucy Reid from Labour, Janie Little from the Lib Dems, Erin Crawford from Reform UK, and Dylan Lewis-Cresser from the Green Party. Let's go to Zach in Windsor. Now, Zach, you have a vested interest in your question, don't you, because you're 15?
Yes, Ian, thank you very much. Good evening to you and your panel. My question was, what do your panel think about the 16s being allowed to vote?
Jack Barwell.
Well, Zach, it's really nice to hear a question from a younger person. I think that younger people need to get more involved in politics. And I think that operations in schools to teach people more about politics in a fair way where everyone's views are listened to is only a good thing. I'm concerned about young people spiralling into circles online, whether it's in Facebook groups or Instagram, and hearing views that are not acceptable in the modern day. And we must tackle that. But no, I don't support a vote at 16, and let me tell you why. I think that the age at which you become 18, often move out of your home, go to university, go do an apprenticeship, it's the right time to have a vote for the first time. Because at that point, you're on your own, there's more independence. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't people at 16 who have that independence, but there's always going to be people who are older or younger, mentally, physically, in different ways at different points. The age range of any particular issue, whatever the issue is we're debating, whether it's driving a car, getting married, consenting, is always going to be a difficult question. So we've got to try to find the right point. And actually, I think that 18 is the right point. I think it's the best moment where the most people are ready to make that decision. I understand that there will be people who are younger who wish to have the right to vote. There will also be people who are older who are not yet ready. We have to try to find that perfect medium. It's not the answer everyone wants to hear. It may not be the answer you want to hear, Zach, but I said I'd come on and tell the truth.
I bet you wanted to vote at 16.
Of course I did, Ian.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. We don't just do policies that would benefit ourselves. That's a very individualistic thing to do, and that's not a Conservative principle I hold myself to.
Lucy, Labour.
I mean, I find it slightly hypocritical that the Conservative Party is against giving the vote to 16-year-olds when you can vote in their leadership elections from age 15. I mean, you were saying in the break that you voted for Rishi Sunak. How old were you?
I would have been 18, 19. I think I would have been.
Did you vote in the previous election?
I didn't vote in the previous election. I didn't have a membership at that point. But you yourself just said that Rishi Sunak and people debating this have said that the membership is not accountable to the entire public. You think the membership elections shouldn't elect the Prime Minister. So you yourself have conceded, when we discussed in the break, that membership elections are different to general elections. And I'm afraid I have to turn the hypocrite coal back on you there.
I don't think I said that. But,
that was the discussion. Well, whether it was the Reform candidate, I have heard Labour activists make that argument before. So I'm not sure we can...
Let Lucy continue.
I'll let Lucy continue. The point stands.
The point that you were making about, being 18 is the time that you go off to university or you go into the world of work. But people start thinking about that before they're 18. People are picking their A-levels, people are going into apprenticeships or joining the world of work. That's when you can start working and paying national insurance. And we also pay VAT pretty much as soon as we can start spending money.
Well, that's an argument for 12-year-olds.
Exactly. Oh, sorry. But I think to say that, because 18 is when you are sort of allowed to go to university, shouldn't 16-year-olds be able to decide on, say, there are policies about tuition fees or interest on tuition fees or even the stuff in the Reform Manifesto about 2-year degrees. Surely you're making those decisions before you turn 18.
So if I start making a decision...
No, Jack, Jack, respect the rules. You've had your say. Let the others have their say first.
It's just a question. I'm just putting the question out there that if you're saying that it's all about these life choices, I mean, I'm a big advocate of votes at 16. I'm sure you can say, people aren't ready to vote, but as you've just admitted yourself, people aren't ready to vote well after the age of 18 and many choose not to. I think that it's unfair.
Okay, Dylan.
Yeah, I'm glad there's an emerging cross-party consensus on this.
Not so far.
But from Labour, from the Greens and from the Liberal Democrats, all supporting votes at 16 because I think it's the thing that makes sense. People pay national insurance and can pay income tax at 16. I paid national insurance at 16 when I had a job. And I just think if we go back...
Why not 15? Why not 14? Because
people aren't paying, because you don't get a national insurance number until you're 16. I think 16 is the right balance. As I said, people are going, as was said by Lucy, people are going off to apprenticeships, people are going off into the world of work and actually thinking about their future at that time. And I think it just makes the most sense.
Erin.
Would we trust 16-year-olds to be drinking? Do we think they're adult enough to be out in the world drinking? To be doing all these adult decisions? Because at the end of the day, voting is an adult decision. I get the argument for letting 16-year-olds vote, but if we're not going to let them drink, why would we let them vote as well? And the argument about the taxes, 16-year-olds don't make enough to pay tax. I get the national insurance, but that's more there for contributing towards your state pension. That's not actually like a full-on tax in itself. Like, it comes out your income for sure, Dylan. For sure. Go on.
I'd just like to come back at that. A state pension is not paid immediately. You don't pay into a pot for your pension. Pension comes out of income tax.
You do. No, it doesn't actually. It comes out to national insurance.
To get a state pension, you have to get a full state pension. You have to pay national insurance for 35 years. So it is contributing towards your state pension. That's what national insurance is there for.
Okay, Janie.
Yeah, to return to the question, I completely agree that votes at 16 are a good idea. as other panelists have mentioned, there's lots of other things that you can do at 16. So it seems to be about the right age, and it's important that young people do get a say in those decisions that affect them. Wales and Scotland have introduced votes at 16 in devolved and local elections, so I think it's about time we follow suit in UK general elections and local elections in England.
OK, let's move on. Zach, thank you very much for the question. Let's move on to Rhys in Newham. Hello, Rhys.
Hi. My question for the panel is, how can we really get young people inspired and involved in politics? I believe that young people are our leaders of tomorrow, next week, and for many years to come. And I believe that there should be a cross-party unification to ensure that more young people can get into politics in a safely manner, because I believe political literacy and media literacy is key.
Right, Rhys, thank you very much for that. This has been a question which I've heard since I was your age, and nobody's ever come up with the answer so far. Janie, let's start off with you. I mean, you've all got involved in politics. You're all sort of between the ages of 19 and 21. I won't ask you how old you were when you first got involved, but how do your friends all think you're a bit weird because of your involvement in politics? Janie?
Absolutely. I get called a nerd all the time. But I think it's important that young people are engaged in politics. And I think to a large degree, the onus is on the political parties to talk about the issues that young people care about, to put those on the agenda. I think sort of one thing relating to this is there's a lot of research suggesting, for example, that women, particularly young women, are more likely to get involved in politics through issue campaigns rather than party politics. So I think when we're looking at young people getting engaged in politics, we have to remember that as with anyone, young people are diverse, and we sort of need to be mindful of those different trends. So I think talking about issues that matter to young people and getting those on the agenda to inspire young people is absolutely important. But I think there's also a role that everyone else can play, talking to the young people in your life about what's on the news and seeing what they think and encouraging inquisitive minds.
And Erin, do you think it's partly that it's party politics that puts young people off? Because I think there are issues that people care about, but maybe they're single issues rather than the whole gamut of politics.
I wouldn't even say just that. I think politics has become an old boys' game, to be frank. It's very rare you see anyone in politics who is under the age of 50. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a terrible thing, but anyone over the age of 50...
Necessarily, thanks.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that people over the age of 50 have been disconnected from what it's like to be a young person. They're not in tune with what the young people want, with what we desire to have.
We do talk to young people,
Yeah, but talking to young people and being a young person are different things entirely.
Well, that may be true, but everybody who's 50 has been a young person. And I mean, I know from my own experience that when I first wanted to go into national politics at the age of 26, I wasn't ready. I didn't realise it at the time. But I know I would have been a much better MP at my age now than I would have been had I gone in as somebody in their 20s.
Why do you think that is?
Experience.
I think everyone has lived experience, but as I said, as age goes on, you do forget what it's like to be a young person, and the same things which might matter to you might not matter to young people. For instance, I'm assuming here, but you probably own a house. We've been talking a lot about the housing market, but that's not really an issue for most people over the age of 50, whereas for young people, this is something we all care about. So if young people aren't invested in politics, the issues which matter for us, they won't get expanded on, they won't get heard. That's why we need more young people actually in politics, in the House of Commons, representing us.
OK. Lucy?
Yeah, I agree with things that were said before about education. I think that's always a really important thing to get kids involved in learning about politics and learning about general elections as young as possible, as young as they can sort of understand it. But I think a really big problem, which is a sort of blocker with young people in politics, and something I hear a lot, is, politicians are all the same. They're all just two cheeks of the same backside, and et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, my hope is that with an incoming Labour government, that a standard of a certain kind of politician will be brought back up, the standards of politics. And I think that when younger people can sort of trust politicians again, trust them to, I mean, maybe that will just be in the form of boring suit-wearing people, maybe that they'll stop sort of being so despondent. And also I think it's important that we don't infantilise young people too much. When we talk about young people's issues, it's almost this sort of liminal word that doesn't really mean anything. But I know that a lot of, like, for example, the Labour Party policies about bringing energy and bringing rail back into public ownership is something that really excites young people. I mean, especially the rail one. I was talking to Erin and Dylan in the lobby before, and they were both talking about how they've had to come a really long way here and about how their train tickets were expensive and a hellish journey from Sheffield and Birmingham.
But Labour's not promising to cut rail ticket prices.
No, but it's promising to have a organic nationalisation of rails, bringing rail back into public hands and raising standards in the rail. I think all of us would agree that the standards of rail at present time are low. But I mean, when I talk about, I'm sorry, am I going on?
No, not at all. It's just I'm very conscious of time. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you two for fairly brief answers, if I may, Dylan.
Yeah. To go back to the question, thank you, Rhys, for asking it. Apologies. But I think in order to get young people involved, we actually need to not just talk to them and talk about them, but we need to include them. Society is wonderfully diverse. It doesn't just include young people. There's so many people of all different walks of life who get less involved in politics because of, as we've heard, it's an old boys' game. People don't feel politics represents them, and we need to go back to the previous question. I think vote at 16 would be a great way to get more young people involved in politics.
Okay.
Because
Jack?
Well, very briefly, I mean, I'm sure that your experience is very true. I've had a different one. I have to say, I haven't walked down the high street and people have been suddenly singing zippity-doo about the railways being nationalised. I just think politicians of all parties, and this is where I'm being honest, have not engaged with young people. So what can we do? Well, number one, we must protect free speech, whether it's in schools or on campus. People need to be able to say their opinion, whether you like what you're hearing or not, so that everybody has a voice in the debate. That's why it's great that all the major parties are represented here. I might not agree with everything that's being said, but I absolutely agree with your right to say it. We need to bring pride back into our younger generation to being British, bringing that sense of community back to our country that I think we've begun to lose. I think it's a more difficult time now. And that's not any politician's fault necessarily. The internet age means that people are staying at home. They're not socialising and engaging from as younger ages with people. That's causing trouble in our society, and it means that people don't want to get involved in what, frankly, is communication with the people. That's politics. And finally, we need to show young people what politics actually is. It's about the ordinary issues that affect you. You don't always think you're affected by politics until a Labour government comes in and raises your family's taxes by £2,094. See how I changed the topic there, Iain. So what we understand is that politics can affect people even when you don't necessarily think it's going to. And that would be my common sense message to young people.
Okay, right.
Can I ask a question?
Very quickly, because we need to go to a break.
Is maybe the fact that the reason the Conservative Party opposes votes at 16 and the fact that I very rarely see Conservative canvassers out in the constituencies that I campaign in under the age of, say, 40, is maybe the fact that you don't want votes at 16 because so few young people will vote Conservative?
Well, firstly, I could just fleck that question back at you and say the reason you want it is because you think the votes are going to go your way. So that kind of cancels that argument out anyway. But I want to disagree with you there. The majority of people working on the campaign I'm doing down in Devon at the moment are under the age of 30. The majority of people we have out canvassing, they might not be the biggest block of voters at the moment in our age range, but young Conservatives are just as passionate as other people are.
Why are they not the biggest block?
Well, I think that historically, older people have always been more likely to vote Conservative. I think they often have experienced the terrors of previous Labour governments, where it's the winter of discontent in the 1970s, or whether it's when...
You know what they say, if you're not a socialist at 17 and a sort of Conservative by 60, there's something wrong.
But then I can't make that argument, Iain, because me and socialism just don't work together, I'm afraid.
I can tell... Listen, we're gonna have to move on and go to a break. It's 10 to 9.
This is LBC. Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
It's ages since we've had two Dylans on the programme, but we're about to rectify that now and go to Dylan in Exmouth. Hello, Dylan.
Hi. My question is, we have a special educational school for around 65 severely deaf students in our local school, in a local school near us, as well as blind and other one-to-one care needs. These students have severe needs that can't be met anywhere else. Do you believe that it is fair for these students to be taxed, meaning that the school's costs will increase and parents will have to pay the burden when they have no other option for care?
Or you're referring to Labour's pledge to put VAT on private school fees?
Yes. Yeah.
Let's go to Lucy on that one.
Well, I would just first like to say that it's my hope that under a Labour government which is pledging to massively increase the quality of teaching and the standard of education across the country, that special educational schools would be widely available and of a very high quality, not just to those who can afford it, but to those who can't afford it as well. In this particular case, I understand that it's a very, very tough decision that needs to be made, but we mustn't keep referring to as an imposed tax. It is the removal of a tax break, and it is up to the school whether it passes those fees on to parents. As much as I understand that maybe I'm avoiding the question now about special educational needs schools, I would like to point out that I do agree with Wes Streeting's argument that state schools, many of which cater to special educational needs children, have had to face the massive slashes in funding from a Conservative government, and they've had to balance that themselves. So it's about balancing the education of not just normal children, but not just regular schools, but special educational schools as well, across the country, and the brakes on private schools.
Erin?
Well, I think every child needs to have a good education. We need to be able to help people, and if they need special education, this should be accounted for. Under reform, we would not have any VAT on fees, and on top of that, we would actually have tax relief on 20% for all independent education. This should help alleviate the burden for these parents who need this extra help.
Sorry to say that again. 20% tax break.
Tax relief.
For parents who send their children to private school.
Not private school, but independent education for special schools. But
that is private schools. I don't see how. I mean, Jack, could you justify that as a Conservative?
No, but then Conservatives, unlike Reform, actually make sure that we can afford the policies that we're putting forward when we go to an election. So that's the key difference there. Look, let's get back to the question. I want to talk about Dylan's question, because Dylan has rung up to talk about a school, obviously, that sounds like in his local area. And I am incredibly concerned about independent schools, particularly those that are giving a quality of education to disabled or disadvantaged students who wouldn't be able to cope in the mainstream. And those students may not be able to exist there any longer. Now, look, I'm going to be fair. I understand why Labour want to do something with private schools. I understand why they don't want parents sending their kids to Eton or Harrow to be able to get tax breaks. This is not the way to do it, because the parents going to Eton and Harrow will be able to afford this VAT. The middle-class parents, maybe single parents at times, who are just about saved up enough because they're aspirational, they want their kids to do better in life than they did, sending their kids to an independent school, they will not be able to afford the extra finance. And I'm sorry, these schools don't have the spare money, often when they're not the top schools, to pass it on, not pass it on to students. It will pass on to students.
No, I need to go to
It will
Dylan.
hurt disadvantaged students.
Dylan?
Thank you, Dylan, for answering the question. Good to have another Dylan on. This issue is deeply personal to me. Both of my younger brothers actually go to state school, SEN schools. And I think it's really important that we invest in state education properly. It shouldn't be that private schools, independent schools have better outcomes than state schools. It shouldn't be like that. We should invest properly in teachers and education to make sure that is the case. The Green Party would put in £5 billion of extra SEN school provision, and that's vital. I've seen how SEN schools, from my own personal case, from looking after my brothers on this, I've seen how stretched they are, and but putting people off to private school is not the answer. We should make it. We shouldn't have poorer people who need SEN support not being able to get that because they can't afford to go to private school.
Janie?
So Davey said before he doesn't support VAT on private schools from the principle that tax on education is bad, but the Liberal Democrats have committed to reviewing the charitable status around private schools. But I think this question touched on a really important issue here, which is special educational needs and disabilities. And this is something I have personal experience with in my families. SEND kids have been let down in so many ways by the Conservative government, with waiting times on EHCPs being awful, among many other issues. And I think the important thing here is that every child deserves the chance to succeed in life, and different children with different needs need different levels of support, whether that's in state education, whether that's in special schools, whether that's homeschooling or other forms of provision. And I think the real key part of this issue is that we need to make sure that every child, no matter their needs and their backgrounds, has the opportunity to thrive and to succeed, which currently they do not.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to end, which I haven't given you pre-warning of, with some quick fire questions. We normally finish with a fun question, but some of these are more fun than others, it seems. Right, one word answer from you on all of these. Just Stop Oil, justified or not? Jack?
Absolutely not.
Lucy?
Unfortunately not.
Erin?
Not at all.
Dylan?
Absolutely.
Janie?
Not.
Well, that's 4-1.
I
wasn't expecting. No, you want to change it?
Yeah, Stonehenge.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Disgraceful.
Right, pro-Palestinian marches, legitimate or just hate marches? Lucy?
Legitimate.
Erin?
Legitimate.
Dylan?
Legitimate.
Janie?
Depends.
On what?
I think a lot of these marches do spout problematic rhetoric, but equally, it's important that people have the right to protest. So I think it very much depends on the protest and the context.
Legitimate in brackets, we're not anti-Semitic.
Okay. National service, yes or no? Erin?
No.
Dylan?
No.
Janie?
No.
Lucy?
No.
Jack?
Yes.
That's a great surprise to us all.
Yeah.
Do you support a smoking ban? Janie?
No.
Jack?
Yes, 100%.
Lucy?
No.
Erin?
No.
Dylan?
No, prohibitions don't work.
Will we rejoin the EU in your lifetime? Dylan?
I hope so.
That's not quite answering the question.
Yes.
Erin?
I was going to say hope not, but yeah. No.
No?
I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea.
Would you hope?
Me
that we
personally,
would?
I would, yes.
Okay. Janie?
I hope so, and I think so.
Jack?
No, I was born in Britain, not the European Union.
Well,
actually, you were born in the European Union. As a matter of
The point
fact.
being that I'm a British citizen,
Yeah,
Ian.
but as a matter of fact, you were
Okay,
born.
you win that one.
Okay. Thank goodness for that. Who's going to win the election? Oh, now this is going to be a bit predictable, isn't it? Well, maybe not. Dylan?
The Labour Party.
Reform.
You don't seriously believe that?
Well, we're coming up in the polls. We've overtaken the Tories already with 2 more weeks. Who knows what we'll do?
Jack?
The Conservatives in the seat I'm running the campaign for. And that's all I have to say.
But in the national election?
I've said my answer, Ian. I answered your question.
No, you haven't actually.
You
But
said who would
anyway.
win the election. I interpreted it in that way. I've said
Good
all I have to say.
Yeah, well, I'm not interpreting it that way. Who's going to win the national election?
The Conservatives in the seat I'm running for.
Do you want me to do a Paxman on you?
You're doing a good job already.
Who's going to win the national?
We haven't counted the
Who's going-
votes. I have no idea who will win nationally, but I feel confident
even
about...
Jeremy Hunt
Doesn't sound like you're
today
taking
admitted
his
that
own
the
part.
Yeah,
Conservatives
even
would lose.
Grant
So if
Shapps,
they can admit it, why can't you?
Because the will of the British people should be listened, and only a few postal voters have voted so far. But David Reid, in the seat I'm running the campaign for, will win his election.
you
He's a great
see, now
candidate.
you have just broken the rules, which means that we're now going to have to read out all of the candidates from your seat, as you well know. Lucy,
Who will win the
national
national
election.
election? I think the British people will win because they'll have a Labour government.
No, the correct answer is to say Labour if we have the honour to win the trust.
Yes, if
of
we have the
British
honour to
people.
serve.
That's the mantra that they will come out with. Janie.
Labour.
Well, that's an honest answer. Thank you very much for that. Well, look, thank you very much to all of you for taking part in this. It's been quite an experience, I think, for everyone in the studio. It's been quite an experience, probably for everyone listening as well. We'll get some feedback on that. Now, let me tell you who the candidates are for Exmouth and Exeter East. And Corey's just putting them up on the screen. So it's Paul Arnott for the Lib Dems, Mark Baldwin from the Climate Party, Helen Dallimore for Labour, Ollie Davey for the Greens, and Peter Faithful, who's an independent. And this is great radio, isn't it? And David Reid, who's a Conservative. And it's all thanks to Jack that I've had to go through that. And Gary Sutherland
to work
for
around your
Reform.
question. Sorry.
And Dan Wilson, who's an independent. There would have to be like 8 or 9 candidates, wouldn't there?
Sorry.
No, don't worry at all. Right, coming up in the next hour, we're going to move on and we're going to return to one of the subjects that we've talked about in this hour, and that is housing. Because there's been a bit of a row in the election campaign today about how to help first-time buyers. All of the parties have been debating this and knocking a few blows out of each other as well. And to my mind, the thing that is holding people back, whether they're young people or maybe older people,